Which is it?
I'm Zev Elef, Associate Professor of Jewish History at Hebrew Theological College. I'm thrilled to be joined by Michael Hoberman, Professor at Fitchburg State University, one of really the leading figures of not just colonial Judaism, but of the Atlantic, of the Caribbean region. And he's here with me to talk, really to challenge a paradigm that existed for many years in American Jewish history. One of the leaders in the field, Jacob Rader Marcus and others, had positioned colonial Judaism as part of a process of Americanization, of secularization. This is how Jews Americanized. It was its antecedent, its origin story, and that moved the process along from the 17th to the 18th to the 19th century of a process of Americanization, of acculturation. And very recently, in the last 10, 15 years, scholars have really challenged that. There was more nuance, there was more religion, there was more culture, and colonial American Judaism couldn't be understood without its larger Atlantic context. And Professor Hoberman has been at the forefront of this work, so it's terrific to be joined by you.
Well, thanks so much, Zeb, for inviting me to participate in this, and hello to all of you students and scholars of Jewish American history. So I thought about what you asked about, Zeb, and your prefatory remarks, and I would say that the first thought that came to mind for me about Jacob Marcus, first of all, give credit where credit is due. He unearthed such a trove of material, and his interpretations are so valuable still, and not to mention the archival work that he did. But that being said, first thought I had was the notion of Americanization, which we associate with him, would make sense if there had ever been such a thing as an American in the colonial era. And I think that the first problem is that to assimilate to America, there has to be such a thing in the first place. And that's where I think myself and other people that you mentioned have cast some doubt. North America was contested territory during the colonial era, particularly with regard to religion. Just to bring it up to its culmination, if we say the colonial era ends with the Revolutionary War, at least in British North America, well, let's not forget that the Revolutionary War itself was a civil war. So that's how contested territory it was. Now, rather than assimilating to some kind of pre-existing or homogenous cultural milieu, it seems to me that early American Jews found themselves to be one among many combative religious subgroups who were all vying for trading rights, for access to markets, for the ability to practice their religion, and so on. One of the points that I made in my book on Jews and Puritans in early America was that the success of Jews, I think, was in large part the function of the fact that Protestants themselves were very eager to prevent any kind of religious establishmentarianism. And because Protestants were constantly at one another's throats about not permitting one another to gain ascendancy, Anglicans not letting the Anglicans gain ascendancy, not the Anglicans not wanting the Congregationalists to gain ascendancy, the Jews sort of they took advantage of that impasse. And that impasse is what we now call religious tolerance. I also think it's very important, and Marcus maybe got into this a little bit, but I don't think he stressed enough, but more recent scholarship makes this point very clear, that Jews were managed and were so-called successful on the basis of who they were not. They were not Catholics, that's the most important thing, nor were they blacks or Indians. And so again, their ability to make their way in colonial America was large part a function, especially of the fact that so much energy in British North America was focused against Catholicism. And Jews, for that matter, Sephardic Jews were in fact the historic, victims of Catholic persecution, which created a certain amount of sympathy on the part of Protestants.
Why they ended up in New Amsterdam. And
exactly.
In the first place.
And some of the colonial figures that we think of, Cotton Mather, no great friend to the Jews, but he had extremely severe criticism naturally for the people who prosecuted the Inquisition and so on.
Not to excuse Peter Stuyvesant either.
Right.
He was far crueler to Quakers and others than he was to the Jews when he tried to expel that group of 23 that first arrived to New Amsterdam in 1654.
Absolutely. So who the Jews were not is important and should be stressed, I think, more. The idea of Americanization is also problematic because it elides the reality, which for Jews was very important, of their multiple ties and relative itinerancy. And this is where the Atlantic world idea comes in. Jews, both of Sephardic and Ashkenazic background, were the ultimate denizens of the Atlantic world. Sarna, other people as well, have shown how It's not so much that an individual or a Jewish family is moving literally in its own lifetime or career across the Atlantic, but that does happen. But the ties that people had, familial ties, mercantile ties, congregational ties, were in Europe, were in the Caribbean, were in North America, and that sort of triangle, that Atlantic triangle, really prevents anything from like Americanization from happening.
Well, economics and poor Jewism brings so many Jews to the colonial Americas. Jonathan Sarna and Laura Liebman have made an argument about the emergence of an Atlantic culture. That Jews would see lightning and they would recite Kabbalistic hymns, writes both Sarna and Liebman, that they notice in the archives because they think the Messiah might come.
Right. This is a story that actually I think was recounted by Ezra Stiles, who was an observer of Jews in Newport, Rhode Island. Noticed that they opened their windows when there was a lightning storm in the synagogue, and he asked them why, and they said, "Well, he might come. It might happen right here in Newport."
Right, and Menashe ben Israel, who figured in very prominently, and in fact, he titled his book "Mikvah Israel."
Yes. Yep. Since you're mentioning Menashe ben Israel. One of the crazy, quirky stories of the colonial era, of course, is the Jewish Indian theory. All kinds of buy-in from mostly Protestant leaders in Western Europe and also in the Americas, belief that native people are actually the lost tribes of Israel. And Ben Israel, to some extent, in a somewhat tepid way, but not completely, bought into it also. Wrote about it, recounted stories of Jewish traditions being practiced among natives that he'd heard about. So there's a lot of sort of messianic fervor.
It made meaning out of the colonial experience that was inherently Jewish.
Right.
True or not, and not true.
Absolutely.
For
and whether it's true or not, if people are getting excited about it, that's what we care about as scholars.
Right. When Ben Israel says the Messiah is going to come, because when interpreting passages in Isaiah and Ezekiel, that when Jews are living on the four corners of the earth, well, we're living in the new world. We too are bringing the Messiah, is what many colonial Jews think.
I think there's a lot more ferment, congregational ferment about these kinds of things, particularly in the early stages of Jews in Brazil in the mid 1600s are getting excited about these things. So to bring it back to your larger point, the messianism, the fervor, the mysticism precludes the idea of Americanization, because Americanization would mean that Jews are all moving in the direction of becoming one with some sort of Protestant or some sort of Christian norm in the Americas. But it's clearly they're not. They're pulled in many directions at once by some of these movements and ferments.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks for clicking and learning. And here are some links to related videos. And subscribe. Don't miss out to making meaning of the past in the present for the future.